It's 2006, and the game is about to take the world and the media by storm.
Never has there been an opening like this in the entertainment industry.
It's a video game that is shattering sales.
The game made almost $1 billion in sales in just the first 24 hours.
You can't downplay the magnitude of such a successful launch. Now, we should mention, of course, the game is incredibly bloody, incredibly violent, not appropriate for children.
The game not only features, but glorifies murder, strong sexual content, and nudity.
Alright, I'm just kidding. In reality, the game was never discussed in the media. It also never reached more than 2 million users, and it probably didn't make a lot of money, because the developers completely abandoned the game after less than 3 years. But the players didn't care that the dev had abandoned them, because as it turns out, they had put the perfect feature in place. Hammerfest is fairly easy to finish, probably just around 100 hours of practice. There are 103 levels complete one by one, the difficulty slowly increasing with new enemies being added. You control a small snowman and kill fruit with your ice bomb or special powers granted through random items you find. At level 100 and 101, you encounter the final boss, and at level 103, you deliver the good fruits and go home. However, the dev also included a scoring system. You get some points whenever an enemy dies, but also through random items. But more importantly, you get huge points thanks to big crystals falling over at the end of levels. And the players quickly learned that these crystals were not falling over at random. Each level has a specific hard-coded order, always the same, in which you need to kill enemies. If you kill all of them in that exact order, you're rewarded with a big crystal. And the more the enemies there are, the more those big crystals will award you points. But also the harder it will be to execute the order. And once you fail that order, that level is over, and you can't go back to it until you restart a new game with a new score. So all the necessary ingredients were in place. And soon enough, players started obsessing over who could do the most orders in the same run and get the higher score. In the code, it seemed the dev considered that 4 million would be the higher score achievable. 8 months after the game is released, someone already reached 5 million. In December 2006, 157 new levels are added. 3 months later, 6 million is beaten, then 7 million. But the community is just getting started, as 3 years later, that same score would barely qualify you for the top 50. Only 2 weeks after the 7 million, 8 million is reached, then 9 million. Everybody's waiting for a new digit, and it happens only 2 months later, when 10 million is reached for the very first time. That record is beaten again several times, until, finally, the most obsessed score of all, Bad Boy 67, scores 14 million points, and the community is in full admiration. Bad Boy has hit almost uninterrupted on the top of the world ranking for close to 3 years, having 15 out of 23 world records, each time beating whoever was his new rival. And his latest score will most likely be impossible to beat, unless himself or some other top players managed to step it up. But they were all of them deceived, for another player was training. Vaxos, a top 20 players at the time, with a score of 10 million, was about to send shockwaves throughout the community. In the course of 4 days in the summer of 2010, he played several promising runs, ending too early. Until, on the 13th of August 2010, he played the run to end all run. 17,398,506 points. The community was stunned. Bad Boy tried to respond, but failed 50 million and a half, almost 2 million behind the new top dog. He never scored any better and spent the rest of his days on the forum, whining over Vaxos' score, showing clear sign of emotional distress. Meanwhile, Vaxos was hailed as the new king, not even a king, but the god of Hammerfest.
Let's bow before this score.
Never have I seen that in my life on Hammerfest.
I've always thought you were probably the best player this website has ever known.
He has become a model for all of us.
You are simply the god of Hammerfest.
Here comes Hammerfest personified.
You are a god of the game.
You'll remain forever engraved in the annals of this game.
You guys are happy. I've just drooled on myself.
Vaxos himself stayed for a time on the forum, gracing the community with his divine presence, until he enjoyed his well-deserved retirement at the Olympus of gaming gods and disappeared from the forum, never to be seen again. Inspired by Vaxos, two new talents arose, Max the Forge and Max 8300 and 2083. Between 2012 and 2017, they reached new heights in what was considered humanly achievable in the game, mastering the hardest levels on the toughest of game modes. But they could never come close to Vaxos' score, winning at both at a meager 15.7 million in 2017. And here we are, in 2025. The website is closed, but the community is still alive on Discord. It has saved the game on an emulator, thanks to which we can still play today. Vaxos is still world number 1, and the players are still dreaming of approaching his score. But some whispers are heard, and it seems some do believe the unbelievable. Has Vaxos cheated? When Vaxos scored 17 million, he ended the craziest progression the community had ever seen. And it all started exactly 1 year before. Vaxos first posted on the forum in early August 2009. At that time, his personal best was 3.9 million. In the course of the next weeks, he will progressively up that score until reaching 7 million after just 1 month. And before the end of the year, he had reached 10 million. That means he only took 140 days to go from 4 million to 10. When you look at the same progression for the players of the current top 20, the one closest to Vaxos is Laverdon14, who took 222 days. Max 8300 and 2083, a highly established player, considered by many to be the goat of Hammerfest, did it in 277 days. All of our other top players took way longer. Vaxos is actually closer to Yeoman's progression, a known and self-admitting cheater who played in the same period as the second best top 20 player. If we look at the number of days between 4 and 9 million, Vaxos is actually beating Yeoman by 3 days, both having a progression more than twice faster than one of the best, if not the best player of Hammerfest. To justify this progression, Vaxos said on the forum that he had actually already been playing in the beginning of 2009, but only through multiplayer with his nephew on his account. He will again repeat the story of the nephew on another message. In his last ever post, in 2018, he will seem to refer back to that story, but this time mentioning a son. Of course, this could simply mean that he also had played at that time with his son, although he never mentioned son back then. In the same post talking about his nephew, Vaxos will mention that he finally had created his account around March or April. However, this doesn't match with his account number, which indicates that it was in reality created in the beginning of July, not in March or April. Unfortunately, it was never picked up back then, and nobody thought of challenging him on that claim. From his 10 million, Vaxos went on to destroy the previous world record. Never had world records seen such a progression. On average, a world record was beaten by 400,000 points. Only 3 world records beat the 1 million mark, but none going above 200,000 after reaching it. Vaxos bettered the previous record by more than 3 million points. In and of itself, this is a massive increase, beyond anything the community had ever seen. And it's a massive increase from 14 million, which is already such a hard score to reach that even today, 15 years later, only 3 other players have been able to reach it. Yet, this is not even the craziest progression. The craziest progression has to do with Vaxos' own previous record. To understand what I mean, take that player's record in July 2006. At that time, this was his best score. Exactly 1 day later, he bettered his record by 500 points. Of course, players usually beat their previous record by much more. In fact, on average, a player will beat his previous record by 500,000 points. But the highest occurrence are still of records being beaten by less than 100,000. And the higher the improvement, the less occurrence you find. That trend is so clear that when you put together all instances of record improvement across the history of the website, a clear and logical exponential distribution is visible. The higher the improvement, the harder and rarer it is. The very last instance is of a player named Popupu, who got close to a 3.2 million improvement. Then you have Vaxos, who went from 10 to 17 million. Vaxos was so far off from everyone else that based on his score alone, most people would have never believed that his record was legit. Yet, when Vaxos did his world record, it was hard to find a single suspicious player on the forum. Why? That's right. Vaxos uploaded his entire run. And upon very close examination, everything looked good. Even after 15 years of the video being online, no direct sign of cheating was found anywhere. Vaxos' progression was barely believable. But because of that video, all suspicion vanished. And players were amazed by what they saw. Vaxos showed a level of perfection never seen so far and never approached afterwards. Getting a high score in Hammerfest is very hard, especially the higher you score. You only have a limited numbers of level, and whenever you fail an order, that's it for the level. You won't get it back until you restart a different run. So you want to miss as little orders as possible. But missing an order is extremely easy to do. The bomb you're using to kill enemies was not made to be precise. It trashes enemy at high speed, and if that speed is too high, or if the frozen food fall on another one, it will kill enemies you didn't want to kill. So you have to play around with it, freeze them with your bomb at the edge of the hitbox so they don't move too fast. But you have to make sure they don't freeze another fruit in the process. All the while you don't get killed yourself, because a lot of things can indeed kill you. Of course, the greatest players have a way of making sure everything goes right in as much level as possible. But inevitably, in some instances, they will fail. The fruits will mix in so much that they won't be able to kill the right one by one. They'll have that one bomb that doesn't do what they were hoping it will do. And you can kill every enemy in the right order, but if you miss even just the last two, the order is failed. So you would expect that the best players are those that can reduce the fail order to a minimum. But that's not what we see. Looking at other available runs online, with a wide range of scores, they all have a fail order percentage between 21 and 31%. What gets you a higher score is not that ratio, but it's how many orders you've tried while still maintaining a 21 to 31% fail ratio. So that's how Bad Boy scores 6 million more than Mr. Laventure. Their fail ratio is almost the same, but Bad Boy tried 50 more orders. You can be the best player you want, but you will inevitably fail some orders. That 21 to 31% ratio represents the chaos and unpredictability of the game that even the best players can't always control.
No.
So what about Vaxos now? Vaxos tried 157 orders and he failed 4 of them. That's a 3% fail ratio. And it's 3% while giving the benefit of the doubt. 2 of the 4 potential fails are very low orders of 3 and 4 enemies that gets you very few points and for which it's not clear that Vaxos really wanted to do them. And the other 2 are so difficult that nobody ever tries to do them during a scoring run. So we can exclude the possibility that Vaxos truly wanted to do the order, but it wouldn't make much sense. In reality, when Vaxos wanted to do an order, he did it. Vaxos had completely erased the randomness of the game that affected every other players, no matter their score. If you look at all those personal records, between 7 and 14 million, you would think that scoring runs follow a certain rule. Until you get to Vaxos. There is also another order that Vaxos became a master of, Crystal Letters Order. There are 7 letters to be collected throughout the game. They have different rarity, and once you collect all of them, all enemies are killed on the level you're at, and you gain 1 more life. The developers seem to be a fan of orders, and they added a third potential reward. If you manage to collect the 7 letters in the right order, from C to L, you get the same bonus, plus 150,000 bonus points, which is far from insignificant. However, it's quite risky to do crystal orders during a scoring run. Unless you're really lucky, it will take way more time to complete the ward, meaning you will gain less additional life, even though they're quite critical, as you have a lot of levels to do and a limited amount of it. Plus, despite your best efforts, you might get by inadvertence a letter you didn't want to get, breaking the right order and depriving you of the bonus. All of this means that most scorers will prefer to maximize their number of lives instead of risking crystal orders. Only 4 out of the 12 other runs we watched tried it. None tried more than twice during their run, and the success rate wasn't great, apart from Bad Boy, who got 2 out of 2 tries. Now Vaxos, he tried 5 times, and was successful on all 5. What makes this even more impressive is that Vaxos didn't show any care in avoiding wrong letters. There are indeed lots of instances of him moving while a letter that might break the order appears, in 147 instances to be exact, but nothing could stop Vaxos' perfection. Here, he jumped exactly a frame before the letter A appeared. Here, he got a letter by mistake, but it was the next one in order. And here, you got an object that brings out random letters in random places. Not only did he get the L, but he immediately got C, the next correct letter. And finally, Vaxos showed that they could reproduce this perfection. Yes, I did not mention it until now, but a year after scoring 17 million, one player created a new ranking based on the highest score you could get using only the original 103 levels. At the time, he calculated that the highest score someone could in theory get was 7.5 million. Vaxos came back out of relative inactivity since his world record and scored 7.7 million. Again, a score nobody has ever managed to approach afterwards. Again, doing absolute perfection, with 84 orders made out of 85 tries, and 2 out of 2 on the crystal letters. If Vaxos could reproduce perfection, then he had to be playing in a way that left not a single room for mistakes. But this is where things got even more strange. Far from playing with precision and delicacy, Vaxos' way of playing seemed often completely careless.
There will always be other things that make the way you play surprise us all. You take reckless risks to do certain things that, for us average player, seem totally absurd.
I can't make sense of it either.
Am I the only one to think he does have a lot of chance?
I have a hard time understanding your game style, because I have the impression that you take risks at almost every orders. Risks that could often reveal to be fatal, and yet you succeed at all of them.
I can't either make sense of your game style, but I simply think that it's beyond me. Happy face.
These messages were all posted by players who believed in Vaxos, but who couldn't make sense of the way he was playing. For the non-experienced player, it's hard to see, but for anyone who has spent a lot of time scoring, it's often quite baffling. Take for example the level 15.0. We call it 0.0 because it's the starting level of a parallel dimension that starts at level 15 of the main and original levels. This is a mildly difficult order, for which you first need to kill these 2 bananas. Pay attention as to how the experienced scorers dispatches those bananas. They're all making sure that they kill the enemies one by one, and that the banana that is falling won't kill another. This stems from hundreds of failed tries, where they were less careful and things didn't go as planned. Now this is how Vaxos killed the first two enemies. None of the higher scorers would play like that. And this is not an isolated incident, these are littered throughout his video. That last level is one of the most famous one. For reference, this is how the end of the order normally goes. And this is how Vaxos did it. So the player base had to wrestle with two facts. First, Vaxos takes a lot of risks. Second, Vaxos is always successful. To explain this contradiction, some of Vaxos' detractors concluded that he was lucky. However, there were too many risks, too many things going right, and such a big difference compared to other players that simple luck couldn't explain it. A year later, the luck argument was put to rest, when Vaxos did his second unbeatable record after only a few days of training. Unpredictability showed that luck couldn't be the factor. Both luck and cheating being ruled out, the quest for an explanation could only go one way, as perfectly summarized by Giguzu, one of the most faithful Vaxos believers. At first I had a bit of the same thought, meaning, good heaven, what luck does this scoundrel has? Then, through saying this, I've looked at the video in a whole different state of mind. I came to think that in the end, except for maybe one or two exceptions, everything was predictable. I think that Vaxos sees further away when he plays than the majority of players. The community concluded that Vaxos had a complete mastery of Hammerfest. What looked like a risk were actually a complete and thorough understanding of all aspects of the game. Vaxos somehow knew the game physics better than the game itself. As we will see, there are three issues with that theory. First, Hammerfest is known for questionable hitboxes and bugs. The game physics is not always reliable. And what kills one fruit might sometimes not kill another. So even if you have somehow integrated the whole game physics in your brain, there are glitches in that physics that you can't account for. This will result in at least some fails, which Vaxos had none. Second, that complete mastery is sometimes hard to reconcile with a player that often looked to panic during an order, fail to do basic actions, or seem not to know what to do during certain orders. Third, a lot of instances seem to show a complete mastery only because luck allowed it to be. For example here, apple number 3 could have kept going and be killed by apple 1, but it stopped to throw a seed instead. That action is completely random. Vaxos cannot predict it, and most other enemies have also random actions, which normally complicates orders even more. But in both of Vaxos' run, that randomness will always go his way. Here, apple number 4 could have kept going and be killed by apple 3, but it stopped to throw a seed instead. Here, apple number 3 could have stopped on the very right and be safe from the radius of the explosion of the bomb that would kill apple 4, but it kept going instead. Here, apple 2 could have stopped and be projected towards apple 3, but it kept going instead. Here, lemon 3 could have stopped to throw a seed, but instead it made sure to escape the radius of the explosion to avoid being the only enemy killed. Here, strawberry 5 could have avoided being killed by strawberry 6 by being on the right side, but it went on the left side instead. And as for every example shown, Vaxos simply could not have anticipated it, because when he threw his bomb right here, strawberry 6 hasn't yet stopped to do its random action, that will then allow strawberry 5 to be perfectly placed. And these are only some examples. To explain Vaxos, the player base ignored many unbelievable aspects of his run, and instead declared him a god of the game. It is true that luck can simply not explain the magnitude of Vaxos' perfection, but isn't there a more rational explanation? Instead of having to hail a player to divine status, would it make more sense that Vaxos, like many others before and after him, simply cheated? If he did, the video he produced is remarkably lacking of any proof of it. So the only thing we can do is opening the door to that possibility. And it first starts with a little something called splicing. Anyone that has watched a cheating video on YouTube will be highly familiar with the term splicing. This consists of editing and combining different runs to make them look like they are done in one. Many infamous cases of cheating have been done using splicing, such as in Super Mario 64, Celeste, or Super Monkey Ball. In Hammerfest, splicing could be very useful. A high score is extremely difficult to attain because you only have one chance on every level. But if you can combine different runs into one, you suddenly can try in order until you get it right. And can you splice different runs into one on Hammerfest? In the middle of a level, it would be impossible, because you would need to have all the enemies doing the same movement, which is not feasible. But when the level is over, now that would be more easy. And when the next level is charging, there, Hammerfest provided you with the perfect opportunity to edit one run into another. Every time you change levels, which happens more than 200 times in a run, there is a very brief loading time. During that time, almost everything on the level disappears, and there is a red progress bar. For only a few frames, it is impossible to distinguish the run apart from the static scoreboard. So one can easily take 2 runs, and as long as the scoreboard remains the same, you cannot tell an edit was made. If Vaxos did splice his run, those few frames of charging would have been the best to use. And interestingly enough, in his video, there is something weird going on. Now and then, and almost exclusively, on his first part to his 4-part video, there is a distortion. A frame where the size of the video captures changes so slightly. This happens a few times in the middle of a level, 12 times exactly. But it also happens 5 times right before that red bar progress. And more interestingly, it happens exactly 19 times during those few frames of red bar progress at the moment where splicing would be the most suspicious of happening. You could argue that this is just random rendering issues, but in that first part of its video, there are exactly 17,855 frames. Only 1.3% of those are red bar progress frames. So that means that more than half of these distortion instances are concentrated into 1.3% of those frames most likely to be used for splicing. If we accept that there is at least a possibility that Vaxos spliced his video to conceal cheating, what cheating would he have done exactly? We can't know for sure, but there is a theory that would explain every single issue we've talked about, without having to declare him a god of the game. This theory holds that Vaxos managed, with the help of a third-party software to save his progression and restart a level whenever he fails something during its run. With this, all unexplainable facts about Vaxos would become explainable. He was able to progress so fast because if you can restart the level until you get it right, it eliminates the difficulty of scoring. He exploded his previous record as well as the world record for the same reason. He played with a lot of risk because if he failed, he could just restart. He never got the wrong letter because whenever he did the level again. It seemed as though everything always went his way because he made sure to restart whenever something didn't. And after all the editing was done, all we saw was a monster of perfection, with no way of seeing anything else. Except in one aspect of the game. In one aspect of the game, Vaxos editing didn't make him look like a god of the game, but perhaps like a cheater. Here is the run of a player named Gollumskate. On this run, he managed to score his personal best, 11.6 million, and did 103 orders successfully. But in some level, Gollumskate adopts a strange behavior. Instead of getting on with the order, he just stops playing. For a moment. Then moves on. And he does this in only 14 levels, out of the 233 he played. All of these levels have something in common. The order is either really hard, or downright impossible. So why not just break the order right away, as other players sometimes do in the exact same level? Well, that's because Gollumskate is patient. He knows that 8 seconds after entering the level, a random object will appear. If taken, that object will have an effect on the game, like giving you random crystals, or slowing down enemies. And in some cases, an effect that might help you do an order, otherwise too hard or impossible to do. But then why has Gollumskate only waited 14 times? First, because you usually want to start the order right away, before the enemies have started to completely mix. Also, because there is an invisible timer in every level, and after a certain number of seconds, a fireball will appear to chase you down, until you lose one of your precious and limited life. So it's only when Gollumskate didn't think he could do the order himself that he decided to wait in the hope that an object will help him. And why do some players wait and others don't? That's because the chance of getting a real help is very slim. There's about a 7% chance of getting some sort of help, but not necessarily a guarantee for the order. That's why a lot of players don't even bother to wait. In his 14 attempts, Gollumskate got a useful object once. That object killed the first correct enemy, but then the rest of the order was still too hard, so he didn't do it. It's unlucky, but not as bad as Babast, who didn't even get a single help from his 18 tries. Mr. Laventer was more lucky, as he only waited 4 times and got a strong help once. That had a 1 chance out of 4 to happen. What about Vaxos? First off, it should be said that he wasn't a particular fan of waiting. Only 3 other players waited less time than him, and there are quite a few popular levels for player to wait on, where Vaxos didn't bother. But after 21 levels without waiting, here's the first time he decided to wait. And he immediately got the second best object you can get, one that kills all enemy at once, a guarantee for the order. Now here is the second time he waited. This time, he got an object called the Ring of Wilhelm Tell, thanks to which you can directly kill the enemies you want without using your messy ice bomb. A guarantee for the order on that level. The third wait of Vaxos is really strange. You would think that this is a pretty hard order, and that most players do wait here, but it's not the case. The overwhelming majority of players prefer to aim for the first lemon right away, including the 3 highest scorers. But Vaxos, who tends to rush every level, doesn't do that. Instead, he seems to be beating his time to go on the right side, where the object will appear. It's not the strongest help, but it's definitely helpful, as it freezes all enemies and allows him to safely kill the first and most difficult one. And his reaction time to the object is quite impressive. The place where an object will appear is usually fixed in a given level, but what object you will get is not. In fact, Vaxos could be getting around 75 different objects, some of which are straight up malice for the player, or a number of others that could break the order. So when Vaxos is there, he knows the object will appear next to the apple, but he should have no idea of what it will be. Until then, Vaxos has enjoyed a 3 out of 3 on a 7% chance for each success. However, on his 4th wade, for the first time, he was unlucky. And again on the 5th wade. For the 6th wade, we're back on a level people usually don't wait at. Why? Because the order is not so hard, but takes time, so you want to jump in early. This is what most players will do. And based on his second record, that's something Vaxos himself would do. But not this time. And finally, at level 77, the 7th and last time Vaxos waited. That order is deemed impossible, because there is a bug with leeches. As soon as you break their armor, the order can't be done. So you either don't bother to do orders with leeches, or you wait for an object. Which option does Vaxos choose? When Vaxos is faced with leeches, he doesn't bother to wait. And based on what we just saw, it seemed justified, as none of the objects that appear could have helped Vaxos. So when he gets to level 77, the logic would be that he breaks the order right away. In total, Vaxos got a strong help 5 times out of the 7 times he waited, each of the 5 having a 7% chance of giving you some form of help. Here are the probability for the other players. And here's what Vaxos got. A 1 chance out of 33,333 that it was indeed pure luck. Or maybe a clue that Vaxos has never been a god of the game. But a fraud.
Some levels leave me rather puzzled nonetheless.
I had a few suspicions of some cheating previously.
M9, if you keep talking about a conspiracy without proof, you'll be sanctioned.
If you bring up the subject again, you'll get a ban for a duration to be decided by the moderators.
Can we tell me what he wants, please?
If you guys really insist, we can do a no-life commentary of the video or a 123 pages report.